type of thing, but instead leaving it here into the public forum and space so that you can hear it, you can learn from it. You might be able to take something back and use it in your own company, at your house, with your friends, whatever that little nugget, little piece of advice might be that you may have grabbed. And if you really want to get involved in the conversation, we'd love to have you be a part of our live tweeting on Twitter. You can go to @peopleg2 or follow the hashtag, all one word, Talent Talk. And Angela, my social media guru, will be there constantly tweeting all the best one-liners, all the best information, links to bios and books, and anything else that may be helpful for you in listening to the show today. If you're listening after the fact, don't worry, you can still find that there. You can still ask us questions and be a part of that dialogue. Now, Talent Talk is live every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is a bit of a distinction from a lot of other shows that are podcasts and things like that. We actually host this live, so our conversation is unedited. We don't go back and change anything or start over. What you hear is what you get in our real life sort of active conversation. And I think that part really brings a great kind of energy to the show. But we know most of you listen to the actual live show later on. You catch us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, maybe Spotify now is a really big repository of podcasts. So wherever you listen to your show, make sure you subscribe and that you have those alerts turned on so that you get pinged anytime that we have a new show available, so that you can listen when you're on the treadmill or in the car or whatever it is you're doing when you're listening to podcasts. All right, my sort of other thing that kind of comes out of this show is, as I mentioned before, the stories. And so many of these stories that we've had from guests over the years have landed in my first book, The Power of Company Culture, and I have a new book coming out this year called Remote Work. So if you're interested in either one of those books, you can find them wherever you buy your books online. Amazon is certainly the easiest. And there's a lot of just fantastic stories about culture and work and remote work and everything that's impacting our lives with talent today. Now that we're done with the business, let me talk about who is on the show today. My first guest on the show will be Jennifer Mackin. She's the author and authority on leadership development. Super excited to hear more about that. Principal and CEO at Oliver Group and principal and president of Leadership Pipeline Institute. So busy woman. I'm sure we'll have a lot to dive in there. And then after the commercial break, we're going to bring in Sarah Mcvanel. She's Canada's recognition expert and founder of Greatness Magnified. As I said, she'll come in the second half, but let's go ahead and bring in Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome to the show and congratulations for being the very first guest of 2021.
Thanks, Chris. I love kicking off 2021 with you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Hopefully it is a Happy New Year. We started last year off with such high hopes and then, COVID came around and kicked our butts. But
no doubt. But we can always start off optimistic until something else hits us.
What's so funny is like so many people were like, the first day I'm really going to do it, 2021. And then Slack had this largest outage ever, right? And so people literally couldn't communicate with their teams and they couldn't work. And it was like, oh, all right, it's going to be more of the same. So
I know, we just got to take it as it comes.
Take it as it comes, right? Yeah, you got to go with the flow.
Yeah.
So, it was, for us, it was a good opportunity. Like, okay, well, this is a good time to talk about, maybe we should have a backup system. Maybe we should have something else in place just in case this happens again.
All right.
Let's talk about you. Well, why don't you kind of fill everyone in on the work that you do, who you are, what your company does, what's important for us to know about you for our conversation here today.
Yeah, as I think about that, I've been doing a lot of reflection on 2020, and I do that every year, but especially this year. And I've learned something new about myself. I didn't love many aspects of this past challenging year. Yet what I realized is I'm really a change agent at heart. I really like challenge and complexity. And our organization works with companies that really like to see change happen. And they like to make sure that their leaders are ready for whatever is coming in front of them, whether it's innovation, whether it's crisis, whatever it is. And so I love the leadership development challenge. And it is a challenge, right? Because it's a lifelong learning journey that everyone's on. And so I've dedicated my career to help individuals, to help companies, which then ultimately help their communities, um, to be the best leaders they can be. And so every service that we provide is around helping leaders be most effective, which helps them and everyone that works with them. So that's a little bit about me.
One of the things that was interesting that I'm kind of preparing to have you on the show is this concept that you talk about in your book, that the U.S. has been developing leaders the same way since the 1960s. And maybe there are some, clear examples of a few variances, but I think, in general, you're right? The general approach and the overall approach, the sort of, traditional wisdom has been relatively consistent. So what is that way? What are we talking about here when we talk about that actual leadership development that has been pretty consistent since the 60s?
Yeah. So it's not so much about a problem with the programs themselves and how we deliver them. The content doesn't need to be a whole lot different than it was in the 60s. The way we lead today, we still have to communicate properly. We have to coach others. We have to, help them understand what direction we're going in, things like that. So the bigger problem is with the C-suite. And then the C-suite team doesn't see it as their responsibility to develop leaders. And they aren't really involved like they need to be in whatever development is executed. So there are really four things that I believe are important that ensure that development sticks. And that is that the strategy of the business is tied to the people plan and to the leadership development plan. That's number one. That's the biggest and most important thing. But then also that leaders throughout the organization guide the development of other leaders. And so it's done at a corporate high level, but then every leader sees it as their job to develop people, which that tends to take a backseat to the functional aspect of each leader's job. Third, we've just got to practice and reinforce the knowledge and the skills that we give leaders. Often we come back after learning something new and it's just the same as we've always been doing. And so that's really key. And then lastly, I really think we have to learn together. And as hard as it has been remote, Zoom, WebEx, other applications are making it easier sometimes to get together and work together. So I think leaders need to learn from each other, and we need to have some face-to-face interaction, even if it's through technology. So those are some of the areas. And I think, we have some companies that are starting to think about development and others that are more advanced and are just working on tweaking it. So wherever an organization is, making sure that leadership team is very involved and that they see it as their responsibility. That's what I think needs to change, and that'll create the revolution.
So let's talk about what that responsibility means, because,
yeah,
I think some people talk about, well, does that mean it's their job to do it? Does that mean it's their
No.
job to make sure it happens? Because, I know a lot of really great people that are in that C-level role. Some of them are great teachers. Some of them are perfect for that. Others of them would be the worst person I would ever want to be trying to teach leadership to somebody else, even though they're like really, really awesome at the job that they do.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know what I mean? So there's a disconnect there. I think I've seen where this happens on a really consistent, good basis. It's that they make sure it happens. And then number two, that they give them the opportunity to go and do it, right? And sort of decentralize the company more into teams, right? So that person can go and has a team and can lead a group of people instead of, I guess, trying to lead based on someone else's values or someone else's lens, right? And I guess it's almost like if someone told me to go teach someone French, and I'm like, I don't know French, and they're like, yeah, but this is your job, go teach them French. You know what I mean? Like there's a disconnect there, as opposed to go teach them what you know. So what do you think about that?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that what's happened, though, is the total other extreme has happened from being involved themselves to delegating all of this to human resources and the leadership development teams. And they don't see it as their role to be involved at all. So responsibility to me means for the leadership team to drive it, to set the standards of, all right, our strategy says we need leaders to be able to do XYZ. Is our development plan for those leaders, does it include helping them be the best at XYZ? So, they're responsible for the execution of the business plan. And who executes the plan? Leaders execute the plan. So making sure that they're ready and they're ready to do that is their job. So connecting the dots between development and where the company is going, driving that, and making it a culture of where learning is accepted. Learning is just part of what we do. I think it's so hard for leaders to say they don't know something or I need help with something. And so if there's a culture where that's okay, and that's just part of how we grow and develop, and that's why it's a lifelong thing. We can't say we've ever arrived and we're the best leader out there. It's just, it's a developing process. So that's what their role is not to completely delegate it, and be involved and support it by maybe coming into some of the development programs that are done and have a few words about the importance of it, and giving them the time to focus on development. So those are some of the things I think could be a middle ground between totally delegating it and seeing it, and the other hand being their responsibility to do it all. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so there are so many things that, let's just say senior leaders in general, not just C-level, but I think senior leaders are asked to do, and have so many things that they are initiatives and just the general work. And I think they're generally asked to manage too many people. And there's all of these ridiculous annual reviews and surveys and things. Like, it's just this minutia of junk. I know when I go and work with a company, I try to declutter first with them and try to, what can we get rid of that we don't need? But then go to them and say, now I need you to be more involved with this, right? Now I need you to, 5% of your time, should be leadership development or having these key conversations or whatever. But if you do it in the reverse, it's like, here's one more thing I want you to do, senior person. And then they just, they can't do it. It's just too much. Do I have this nice leadership conversation with John or Susie, who may or may not be a leader here one day, or do I deal with this $1 million client who we might lose, right? So
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, prioritizing, the way that I would say time can be freed up to do more of this is by preparing the people that report in the whole senior level. If they prepared the people that report to them to do more on the functional aspects of it, they could do more of the people development, because I think a lot of leaders are really working at a level below where they should, as opposed to readying the people that work for them. And so then they say, I don't have time. And when you dig in and look, to your point, decluttering, when you get in there and look at what they've got on their plate, they shouldn't have a lot of it on their plate, or maybe it's not priority. So helping them see through that is a great way to help them work at the level that they should be, at the highest level they should be.
Are there any other reasons that maybe, leaders aren't more directly involved in training? I mean, do you get to a certain size of a company and it just becomes HR's responsibility? It just becomes, we've created a department and so it's their job anyways. I mean, is that part of it, or are there other factors in play?
Yeah, I do think that's part of it. They consider it kind of this HR handoff, and that goes to really making sure that every leader sees that that's part of their job. If you look at job descriptions or you look at development plans for leaders, how often is there competencies that are required or pieces of it that are about developing other people? It's usually about the financials or the process that they're responsible for, things like that, and less of the people. So I don't think they see it as their job, believe it or not, to develop other people. So I think that's a big problem of why they're not involved in that development. And then you've got the time restraints that you and I just talked about. And then I think the biggest reason that leaders are not as more directly involved with developing their people is they don't know what to do. And it's kind of to your point of, they could be a great leader, but maybe they're not effective at developing other people. They don't even know how to do that. And we're not taught how to do that. If you think about the college classes, even in business that we take or graduate school, there's not a whole lot about how to coach other people, how to develop other
There's
people. And so
nothing.
that's missing.
It's all accounting and economics. And
Yeah.
it was sort of
Yeah.
why I stopped. I was in at a business degree. I was going for one and I stopped because I hated the classes. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so just, stuff that I didn't think was important. It was important, but not important for me to know to go and run a business. And later on, I focused on all the people stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody else could create the goals and supply and demand and, debits and credits. And like, that's just stuff that I didn't need to be a master at.
That's right. And if you
Somebody
think
else
about
could.
the people that go back for advanced degrees, they want depth of understanding.
Mhm.
And I also received my MBA and felt similarly in a lot of the classes, either, oh, I could read this in a book and be good, but what was missing was a lot of how do you mobilize a group of people? We did a little team development in classes, but not really about how do we lead others. And so I think they're changing that a little bit, but it is a big ship to move to get large institutions to change their curriculum in that way.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think I saw a figure of like 7 years people are leaders for 7 years before they get any sort of development on how to be a leader. Where else do we do that? Where we put someone in a role, but we don't tell them how to do it? It just surprises me.
We've developed a couple things. So there are clearly some people who have taken on this role of being a leader from very early on, and they have a lot of practice. I mean, I was always the captain of every team I was on. I was like annoyingly a leader all the time, but that's not most people. And so when I realized that, because I was sort of always looking for that person to hire, and I realized that that's not a consistent thing, that instead what we had to do was find great people who had the ability and had the desire or had the capabilities to be a leader, but to your point, weren't necessarily trained that way.
Right.
And what we did is that we gave them opportunities to be a part-time leader. And I think this is where our organizations make a big mistake, is they take someone who's great, who has talent, who has all the potential in the world, and they go, you're really cool. Guess what? Now you're a leader all the time. Now you have 15 people report to you.
Right.
Instead of, how about you do this project? How about you have this one responsibility and you manage some of these people for this project, some of that. Let's see how you do. Let's see what questions you have. Try it out. I've had people that said they would never be a leader. They never want to be in a leadership position. They did part-time leadership and they became leaders. Other people did it and they were like, I'm totally right. I know I'm not in it. And then people we thought would be great, they were terrible at it. And are you willing to accept help? Or maybe you're going to have to go backwards, right? So is that a good approach? Are there other approaches that you think organizations need to take? Avoid this sink or swim sort of a mentality.
I see what you're. I like this, dip your toe in the water, so to speak, a little bit, that you're suggesting. I don't see that done very often. But I think the key is that when people start their careers, if all organizations could lay out different various paths of success for them. So what does it look like to be successful? What is a leader? When you become a leader, what are the expectations? What does success look like? But if you're not a leader and you're an individual contributor, you're a specialist, you could go that route and what success looks like there, so that individuals can opt in to things much better. They make better decisions on whether I'd want to be a leader or I'd rather be a specialist, if they know what that looks like, because you don't know what you don't know going into your career. So you go to a leadership role because that seems to define success for a lot of people. So I think we have to set the expectations, let them know what it looks like to be a leader in different areas of the business, and then help them create a development plan to get to that next step for them, whatever that is that they're interested in. What does that look like? What do you need to know? Who else would you want to mentor or mentor with and talk to and learn from? So it's taking this active approach before they take a new position of what's available to them, and how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, have you seen sort of this maybe a new change? We've talked about for a lot of years about how millennials want leadership to be different from what the previous generations were seeing. And then we have even more in the workplace. We have new generations in the workplace. What are you seeing right now around the generational, sort of lens about what's expected from leaders?
I think that all people, all leaders, it hasn't changed a whole lot over the generations, Chris. I think that millennials, what's different isn't that they need something different necessarily. They have just come to expect that they will be developed. They are demanding that part of the workplace needs to be to prepare them, that it's just kind of this expectation they have, whereas previous generations never had those expectations. It was just almost a reward to be developed versus an expectation. So it's a style difference that way. And I think 87% of millennials say that development opportunities are very important to them. And they also want nonstop feedback. That came from a Forbes study that I recently saw. And so they want opportunities, and they want people to share, how am I doing? What could I do differently? And so I love that about that they're going to be driving some more development for whatever they need, or they're going to go somewhere else. And so that's going to get a company's attention that way. So that's the biggest difference I see in this generation, that the newer generation in the workplace.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. That whole idea that, my job needs to be the one to provide me this stuff, as opposed to I'm going to go outside of my work and I'm going to find a mentor, or I'm going to take a class, or I'm going to do this thing to improve myself. That we sort of demand it from internally has certainly been a shift. I think it's a good shift, right? Because it's a bit difficult to go out and do that thing on your own and no one knows about it, right? And then expect your job to then suddenly reward you for go out and doing this. And this is often why people would leave their jobs, right? They couldn't ever get that promotion up because nobody internally understood what they had become, where they had grown to.
That's a good point.
It took leaving, and that's you see a lot of people leave and then come back, right? It was the only way they could continue their career path at a job, is to get a promotion outside and then come back.
What a shame.
Yeah.
Because often they don't come back. And and I think the other piece to the challenge is that if you're needing to go outside for everything, if leaders don't know what's expected of them in the next role they're in, then how do they know what to go get from the outside?
Right.
So they don't know what they don't know. So I think that's a really big challenge, is to drive your own development. I see a lot of leaders have trouble coming up with their own development plan. Mm-hmm. They don't know what they need to work on or what they want to be able to do next. So I think it's this joint collaboration that's required. And I think with the remote work, more up your alley than mine, I just think this is going to be more and more important, that we communicate clearly, that we ask what every individual needs. Individuals need different things right now than ever before. And we need to be able to ask and see what is needed for every single person, which might be slightly different, and offer up some flexibility based on what they need. And so I'm really anxious to read your book about that, because I think it's still a bit of an unknown, and people need some guidance.
Well, there's definitely a lot out there. So, well, speaking of guidance, final question, and then we got to run to commercial, but how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out? What are your websites? What are your sites? Give us all the details.
Yeah. Well, look up my book, Leaders Deserve Better, A Leadership Development Revolution. And you can find that plus anything more about me at jennifermackin.com. Super easy if you can spell my last name, Mackin, jennifermackin.com. So thank you for having me, Chris. I really enjoyed talking about this topic.
Loved having you, Jennifer, and really appreciate all your your input and contributing here to the show. Hopefully we can have you come back at some point, give us an update on all the awesome stuff that you're doing, and stay safe. And I hope your 2021 is even better.
Thank you. Same to you. Same to you. Look forward to coming back.
All right, we'll be right back after this quick commercial break, and we'll bring in my second guest, Sarah Mcvanel.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months, and the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
It takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. And at the end of the day, the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be you. So United Way is asking you to make a pledge. Tutor a child who needs help. Mentor a kid who needs someone on their side. Volunteer to read to children. Because when a child advances, we all advance. Be a reader, tutor or mentor. Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Take the pledge now at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. In case you missed my last guest, you can catch her on the rebroadcast of this show. Of course, you may know we throw this live show onto a podcast on iHeart, on iTunes, on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcast. So don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you get alerted when this is up and ready, and you can listen to that interview as well as my next interview with Sarah Mcvanel. Don't forget, you can go to talenttalkradio.com as well. It has all our past episodes. You can subscribe to that as well and be a part of the conversation there. And speaking of being a part of the conversation, you can also go to Twitter and you can follow at PeopleG2 and watch the live tweeting right now and be a part of that conversation. Comment, give us your thoughts, get all the best one-liners and links to books and profiles and everything else. So hopefully you can go and do that. But let's talk about my next guest, Sarah Mcvanel. She's Canada's recognition expert and chief recognition officer at Greatness Magnified. Super excited to have her on the show. And let's just go ahead and bring her in. So Sarah, welcome.
Hey, great glasses, Chris. I
Thank
hope
you.
that your members, your listeners are not being denied the pleasure of this.
Well, sometimes we do tape the video. Now, this show happened to be that we didn't have video going. I don't think so. But yeah,
fine.
people have seen them. I will tell. I'll be honest. I'll tell you a funny story. So, I saw these glasses online. They're ridiculous. They're gigantic, and I got all three colors. And
Nice.
it's because I became a grandfather last year, and I said, if I'm going to be a grandfather, I'm going to wear big, giant grandpa glasses.
They
So
are the coolest grandpa glasses I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
they're actually like readers. They're just for reading, but they're gigantic. And I did it as a joke, and everyone loved them. And I'm like, well, I guess this is it forever. I'm wearing these. This is my new style. This is my new look. This is what I'm doing. So
Yep. It's the Seth Godin version of glasses for you, Chris. They're awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, not as cool as his. I mean, he has the coolest
Come
ones.
on. You're
But-
competing. You're in the same level now.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into today's conversation. Why don't you explain to everyone who you are, what you do, what you're passionate about, so we kind of have a starting point here for our conversation.
Well, I was that weird kid in school who could never laugh at people when they fell down and scratched their knee or were embarrassed. And I swear, I think that I was always designed to be the recognition expert, because that, whether I chose it or not, was always my job in school. And that's what I do in my family. And that's, I think, how I've raised some pretty healthy, happy teens, despite the fact they're in lockdown right now. So really, I just see it, this is my mission, to be able to help people see the exponential power of recognition. And it's based on being a recovering healthcare administrator. I saw how starved people were for recognition in that sector. And God knows now we have shown that we've seen that outpouring of appreciation at the beginning of COVID. And yet, where is it now? So I'm hearing from so many people who are craving it now more than ever. And that's really, I think, Chris, what we're here to talk about is how can we leverage recognition more? It's so easy to do, and yet we're often starved for it.
So I hate to start from this point, but I'm going to. So when in my first book, I actually did a lot of research on this because I was like, why are people getting this wrong? Because for me and my company, like, we found a really easy way to do it. It works great. It's free. It's easy. And then I did the complete opposite, right? I found a big giant one that was working with Caesars Entertainment. It works really well for them. It's super sophisticated. It cost them millions of dollars a year, but like, it works, right? It was sort of two polar opposite examples of what you could do. But I'm still like shocked at how bad companies are at recognition, about how they think, some $5 Starbucks card is going to like give them the balance that they need for that employee for all year long. So maybe we should talk about, why does recognition matter, and where do you think we should be starting this conversation?
Well, the great news is, especially for those who have really struggled economically in these challenging times, is that probably what you found in your business, what almost everybody say in terms of their most preferred method of recognition is a simple thank you. Our research supports it. I'm sure your boots on the ground experience, your leadership experience supports that. Well, that's pretty hard to sell. So why are there all these fancy companies selling these fancy things to, to people in fancy suits? Well, because that's what you can get people to pay for. Trophies and plaques and awards and swaggy dinners. Well, I'll tell you, Chris, the organizations that I worked with this year that have kept recognition strong when they couldn't be in the same room, or essential services where they were just working their tails off. It's strong connective cultures where people could see the little extraordinary moments that we miss in our ordinary lives if we're not looking for it. And that's where it starts. It's a simple thank you. That's just not usually with something that is cool to put on an annual report. And yeah, that's what people want and need.
Yeah. So you think that culture can be defined by how much recognition is present, or how much it's, sort of happening with inside the organization? And, what do we sort of use, I guess, to measure that, or to use as our evidence?
Yeah. Well, almost all of us are engaged in some form of satisfaction survey, engagement survey, and the data that we used to write our first book, Forever Recognize Others' Greatness, a massive, huge database that had been unmined. We wanted to see, in fact, just what you're talking about. Is there any correlation to a high engagement, high satisfaction culture if there was very high levels of recognition present? And we saw dramatically different results, statistically significant, in trust in the organization, in continuous improvement behavior, in retention. I mean, I'm telling you things that you already know, right, Chris, that you're already seeing and that you've written about, you and Kim have written about in your books. And so there is a dramatic difference. And yet what we often do is that we go straight to the hard stuff. We try to build trust, or we try to implement this massive lean continuous improvement culture, and we miss the building blocks. So I would never profess to anyone to say the key ingredient to your culture is recognition, because that would be oversimplifying things. And it's simple to get started on the tough stuff. And given how exhausted people are, if you're working flat out right now, the toilet paper companies, the healthcare organizations, disability services, so forth, they don't have any extra time or energy. And even if your industry has collapsed, like mine, the speaking industry, and you're struggling to make bank, the good news is what people have been wanting all along, and that you will build trust and you will build relationship equity that you can leverage on the other side of this, are those small acts of acknowledgement and appreciation right now.
Yeah. You know, I think if anyone's listening out there and they're wondering, well, is my recognition program the right one, or is it working? And how do I know? I mean, for me, the first test is always, are the introverts in your organization getting recognized on par with your extroverts?
Yes, I love that.
And
Love that.
because it's great, us extroverts can get trophies and we can get in front of everybody and get a big round of applause, and like that's like what we live for, right? That's like our gasoline,
Mhm.
it's our energy. But not introverts, right?
Yeah.
And I think all those programs that you kind of mentioned, they really are targeted towards either extroverts or people who are very opportunistic, which isn't really what you want, right? What you want is people who did something good, for someone to say thank you or to pat them on the back, or whatever it is. Are there other factors or the other things that you use to kind of maybe
Mhm.
simply help someone understand if they're on the right track?
Well, I love, actually, I never phrased it quite that way. So you and I will have to collaborate on a LinkedIn article about that.
I
What are
love
your
it.
introverts feeling about recognition? So true. Because, the other component to that is your recognition program so painful for those extroverts that they would never want to be acknowledged because they know they're going to be called out in a meeting or the front cover of the newsletter. So what I share with folks, and I welcome your experience with this, Chris, is that we need to ask people, that platinum rule, treat others the way they want to be treated. And yet we kind of have told ourselves that we're too busy to ask and there's too much turnover to care. And yet really the people who are so loyal to you, how do you demonstrate that loyalty in return? You figure out what makes them tick. What do they value? So you gave the example earlier about the Starbucks gift card. That may be something that's really important to me. I actually need a token to feel acknowledged. Well, not everybody's going to need that, but if I need that, that's how, and I worked extra hard. I want that, but maybe I have no Starbucks in my town. Maybe I hate Starbucks. They're the devil. My dad ran a coffee shop and they ran them out of town. Don't give a Starbucks gift card because it's going to backfire. So find out what people's favorite restaurant is. What do they take in their coffee and their tea? Do they like private recognition, public recognition? And when you have things like long service events and the biggest ticket items that we spend on recognition, when was the last time you did a check-in with folks about it? This has been a year of the year that we've just come out of reinvention. The most successful annual event, recognition event for a disability services sector organization here in Canada was the virtual event that they put on. It cost less money. They didn't do it to cost less money, but it actually did physically cost less money if you don't have to rent a big banquet hall and, pay for people's time off and so forth. And it was by far and away the most successful because they did jib jabs with the, executive director and all the board members being goofy, and they had great music, and they did a Kahoot, and then I was the speaker, and we did polls, and it was so engaging. And yet people tell themselves, well, we have our event. When was the last time we checked in with people that that's actually how you would want your long service or your retirement or your, best safety rating acknowledged? So check in with people. It's not hard, and it doesn't have to be a lot of work to do that.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of wisdom around, figuring out what your people need. So this is on a very micro level. So a leader who maybe has 5 people reporting to them, yeah, it's important to know how those 5 people, kind of work and what's going to help you motivate them. Are they bringing them a muffin or giving them a $5 Starbucks card? Is that going to give you that extra thing? And if you're doing it because that's a part of what makes you feel as a leader good, if that doesn't make you feel like you're being phony or just trying to get a little more work out of them or something, right? Is that really a part of that natural feel? But I will say that we found a little bit of the opposite, that as our recognition program got better and better and it was more democratic and it was more bottom up, all of that stuff went away. No one ever needed that anymore, because when the company had a really easy, safe way that worked for everyone, and for us, we have what's called a green flag, and we have a water cooler room on our Slack. And so that is a public room that everyone's in. Anything can be talked about in there as long as it's work appropriate. That's where we say thank you. That's where you share, you know, if your kid scored a goal at soccer on Saturday, or if you got engaged, or it's sort of our general, you know, for everybody. But that's where we thank people. And it's bottom up. So we actually encourage managers to do the least amount of recognition
Yeah.
and sort of direct employees, people who are more on, you know, par with each other, to do the recognition first. Now, it happens that managers do, of course, but we don't want it to be heavy on the manager side, right? We don't want it to be top down all the time. It's, geez, people noticed I did a good job. And so then they do green flags, and everyone who's on there say green flag, way to go, good job. We all see it. Now there's that sense of publicness, but we didn't put anybody up on the stage, to your point, right?
Right.
My painful introverts who would be like, that would be death to me. Don't put me on the stage, right?
Yeah.
So we eliminate that, but at the same time, the extroverts still get their attention.
Yes.
And then I think the other big reason that this works is we don't track them. There's no reward for how many green flags you got. There's no competition at the end of the year. There's no bonus. There's no gift card. There's nothing. It's just purely altruistic. It's purely just, hey, great job, way to go. And that becomes contagious, I think.
Are you talking about, Chris, that you want people to treat each other like humans? Is that, just a second, hold on.
Yes, I know this is a new concept for some people, but yes.
Let's deconstruct it. If that's, weird.
But,
In the workplace, though? Come on.
Yeah, but what's interesting, maybe what people aren't hearing and what I'm saying, is that I've created the space and we created the signposts. And that's what's important, I think, for leaders and organizations to do, is where do you do it? When do you do it? And how do you do it? Because people will treat each other like humans, but if they just do it on their own and it's hodgepodgey and it's messy, then it doesn't work as a strategy. I think, you know.
Well, it shows that you have skin in the game, because you're mindfully creating a system in which you can exponentially spread recognition, and you're putting some effort behind it. And I'm sure if people weren't doing it, or weren't still fresh in Slack, then you'd shift it to something else. If it's working, don't sort of fix something that's not broken. And, you know, what's really, I think, so great, and again, I hope folks hear when they're listening to that description, is that people are not only in control of how much peer recognition they're doing, and also leader to staff, staff to leader, it's also, I get a chance to have autonomy about what I choose to share. So in other words, if what really matters to me is that my kids are successful, that's what I want to celebrate with you. If I want to celebrate, I finished my project early, or we got a new client acquisition, great, that's what you're going to share. So it actually helps with reinforcing that platinum rule, because I'm not going to celebrate and share publicly on this forum something that I don't care about. For people who don't quite have that yet, and who need some kind of structure to get started, because that's sort of one of the biggest things I hear is, well, what's my next step? How do I make sure it's sincere? Because this is not how I'm known, or we're so busy around here, it'll seem like I just came back from a conference and I was told to do something. We definitely don't want to seem like, you know, robots. Right. I think, you know, one of the quickest, easiest ways to ask people is do a bit of a quick survey. I have a one-pager on my website, greatnessmagnified.com, under cool stuff, that's just called a recognition checklist. And people can fill it out in 5 minutes. I used to have people, when they started my team, fill it out, and they would give it to me on day 1. And so let's say 6 o'clock at night, we're all working late. I would go, to your point around grabbing muffins and coffee and tea, and have them exactly the kind of muffin or tea that they wanted made and brought to the team. So it cost maybe $20, because, you know, Tim Hortons is cheaper than Starbucks here in Canada. So, you know, $20, and your dollar would go really far. So basically be free for you. But it, you know, that made people still talk about that. I don't even lead this team anymore. We don't work together anymore. And they still talk about the day that I brought everybody their own muffin, like it was, they joke like it was kindergarten class, you know. Right. They remember it because it was surprising and it costs virtually nothing. If I had done something flash like gift cards, nobody would remember.
No, I almost feel silly. I've said this a few times on the radio show, but one of my favorite movies is one called Finding Forrester. And it's with Sean Connery. It's a really good movie. It's, you know, he's supposed to be this famous author, but he's a recluse. And anyways, he gives this advice to somebody, and he was talking to a young gentleman about women in general, but I've taken this sentence to be he's very applicable to any person in your life, especially employees. He said the key to a woman's heart was an unexpected gift at an unexpected time.
Mhm.
And I have taken that and reversed it into just people in my life, or employees, or vendors, or clients. I've seen there's a whole book, I think it's called Giftology, around this, right? It's better to send someone a gift and say thank you on April 29th
Yeah.
than it is to send them the normal holiday gift that everyone expects, with the summer sausage and the crappy, stuff in there that no one's ever going to eat, or they hand off to somebody else. Like, doing something unexpectedly that's also thoughtful, and about that person. Right. They remember the day you brought them a muffin, and what did that cost you? Nothing. Right? It was a simple act of kindness. That's great.
And that's, I think, maybe what would be a good thing for people to anchor right now. If they think like, oh, I do not have the time to do this stuff, or this is natural to Chris. We don't use Slack. Like, there's all kinds of reasons we can think about why we can't get started, and they're legit. You're right. You don't have Slack, it's banned, or you don't know if you have the time to organize everybody to start doing this. All legit. What's one small step you can make and step forward? It's not about creating a recognition strategy or program. I mean, I do that too. I help global organizations rebuild their program. And you can bet plaques are not the first thing we start with, because when we ask employees and leaders what works, who is the best person you've ever worked for around here? What's the practices that stand the test of time, no matter how busy things get? What are the rituals you used to practice that you don't practice anymore and you miss them? Similarly, what's something you've heard somebody else does that's so great that you want to work for their team, even if it took a demotion? All of the answers are there. The wisdom is in the collective. And yet we have this, and I know you buy into this, because the example you provided is such a perfect example of this belief that we seem to think that the responsibility of these initiatives is on the leader's part. And because we have so many stats thrown around, like people leave bosses, they don't leave organizations, which, yes, that's been validated. And that what we don't see in the footnote of that stat is, however, they are definitely going to stay because it's a great, strong collective culture. So how can we be leveraging recognition to reinforce the culture that everybody wants to be a part of?
And I think there was something you said in there, and I just wanted to add a little bit to it, that about starting small. If you are in an organization, because I think most people are listening to this show, it's like when we talk at conferences, most people you're talking to maybe aren't in a position to make a change throughout the organization as a whole. And they feel like, well, if I have this great idea, I got to go back and convince the CEO or the head of HR or whatever to do this whole giant thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that.
No, not
all
at all.
you have to do is ask your people. You can go back and just create a program for your 5 direct reports or 20 people or whatever it is, and make a difference. And it may catch on, right? It may become something that spreads throughout the organization, or just makes the people that you work with happier.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And I think that's that mindset that sometimes can help people make more changes if they realize they don't have to change everyone in order to make change happen for them.
Yeah. It almost implies that people in the organization need changing if that's our goal, when in actual fact, we just need to reinforce what's already working well.
Yeah. Well, real quick, before we're out of time, last 2 quick questions. First one is there a book that you're reading right now, or maybe one that you typically suggest people check out?
Well, the book I'm reading right now is called Learning from the Octopus, which is all about how evolutionary theory helps us to understand the biggest complex problems in the world. But that's sort of my what's on my shelf right now. There aren't a lot of really great recognition books. I'll be honest, I'm a little biased that, the book that you and Kim have coming out is one of my favorites for the virtual world. There's so much in there around recognition in people. So I've been consuming that en masse in my advanced virtual copy. I hope I'm allowed to mention that that's coming out. Am I allowed to? Shoot.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So that's fabulous. To be honest, though, most recognition books are the how-tos. And that's like it minimizes it down to its technicalities. And that's, as we've just discussed, it's about the human experience. So I would say you're going to get way more value from reading books like Dare to Lead, which is all around vulnerability and courage and having courageous conversations, including courageous, abundant oriented conversations. And of course, even though it was written 6 years ago, I'm a big fan of my book, Forever Recognize Others' Greatness, because it's all about what we practiced and we taught teams imploding at the seams how to do. Start with recognition, and everything else is going to get easier. If you don't have appreciation and acknowledgement as part of the fabric of your team, there is no way we're going to be able to come back from the most difficult issues that we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the great book recommendation. I've already added it to my list of possible things to read.
You'll love it.
Looks like it doesn't have an Audible version, which could be a struggle for me. I do listen to most of my books, so we'll see. But final question, most important question is how can people get a hold of you? How can they learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, I'd love for folks to jump over to my website. There's probably lots of cool things that they can use under cool stuff. So greatnessmagnified.com. And of course, if folks want to connect with me through social, I'm on all of them except TikTok, because I've been banned from TikTok because I have teenagers. I don't think there's anything I need to add in that would be of value on TikTok anyway. So all other main forms of social media, I am there and trying very, very hard not to embarrass my teenagers while there.
Well, I think see if they told me I couldn't go on there, I'd be on there in 2 seconds.
You know, to be honest, I actually have, and it's super boring. And I just feel like it's a strobe light. I can't even ground my attention to one thing.
I shouldn't tell you this, but if you like the stuff that you like and just immediately disappear off the stuff you don't like, it has the best algorithm in all of social media. And within a couple of days, you start getting stuff that's so impactful to you.
Okay. All right.
Early on, it's like stupid people, I shouldn't say, for me, stupid people dancing, doing stuff I don't care about. But as soon as you like the stuff that every once in a while you get something that's good, that is their key. That is like their gold nugget, is they have the best algorithm. So
see, there you go. Great tip. Thank you for that, Chris.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being on the show today. Hopefully we will have you come back. We'll have you share more, in the coming months or years. And can't wait to hear what you think about the book once you get to read it all the way through. So feel free to tell anyone you like. That's always, what is that? All publicity is good publicity. So
yes, I love it. Thank you.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Matt Piper in New York. They've spent tens of millions of dollars all for today. The four candidates in a Senate runoff election in Georgia have a lot of eyes on them because control of the Senate hangs in the balance. WSB's Robin Walensky is speaking with those at the polls.
Kelly and Perdue, yeah.
This Trump supporter tells me she's voting for Republican Senators Perdue and Loeffler with the hope of continuing the president's policies. But she and other voters here question if their votes are going to count, as they don't trust the results of the general election.
No, I have no faith in the election right now, but we're doing it.
Does it count? No, it doesn't count, but we're here anyway.
Robin Walensky for CBS News, Peachtree City, Georgia.
Republicans will hold on to control of the